In today's hurried life, people seem to be racing against time. Mornings are a frantic rush to wake up and get to the office, followed by a hectic day of work and plans that must be completed. Evenings bring exhaustion, pressure, and sometimes a heavy burden of worries about making a living and financial security. Some believe that the more they work and the more money they have, the happier they will be. Yet, they find themselves growing increasingly restless, fearing loss as their possessions accumulate. The more they crave, the more they feel insufficient. The human heart is like a lake stirred by the wind, with waves constantly rising, never finding peace. How many times in our lives have we told ourselves, if only I achieve this, buy that, or succeed in a certain goal, I will find peace? But once attained, another emptiness and anxiety emerge. Why is this so? The Buddha once taught that the profound cause of suffering lies in the human mind not being still. A restless mind, no matter where one lives or how much wealth one possesses, will always feel uneasy, like someone holding a pot of water. If we continuously stir it, the water will become cloudy. We cannot see our reflection. But if we set the pot down and let it settle, the surface of the water becomes clear. We can then clearly see our reflected image. Similarly, when the mind does not stop constantly calculating, worrying, and competing, we cannot see the happiness that is right before our eyes. Only when the mind is still and tranquil can the heart truly find peace, and from that, joy and serenity are awakened. In the scriptures, the Buddha once told a story about a king. Although he owned an entire kingdom and had treasuries full of silver, he tossed and turned every night, unable to sleep. In contrast, a poor woodcutter ate only rice and vegetables daily, but his mind was at peace, unburdened by competition, so he could sleep soundly every night. That story reminds us that happiness does not depend on external circumstances, but originates from the tranquility within the mind. If the heart is full of ambition and worries, even lying on a jade bed will bring unease. But if the mind knows how to stop, sitting on a bamboo chair can still feel fulfilling and warm. In everyday life, we often see people exhausted and anxious because of work, family, and the struggle to make a living. Some sacrifice their youth in pursuit of fame and fortune, only to end up with deteriorated health and a weary spirit, never getting to enjoy peaceful moments with loved ones. Others live in resentment and anger over minor squabbles, ultimately becoming the first to suffer. All these things stem from a mind that has never awakened, constantly like a wave pushed by the winds of life. So, how can one achieve peace? The Buddha taught that there is no need to search far, nor to seek it from others. Purity is already inherent in each person's mind. We simply haven't stopped to recognize it. When we learn to slow down, breathe deeply, and smile at the small things, the mind will gradually settle. When we let go of a little craving, forgive a little resentment, the heart will lighten. And from that awakening, true joy and happiness will emerge. A joy independent of external circumstances, not easily swept away. Therefore, to live a joyful life, one must first learn to quiet the mind. Stillness is not indifference, nor is it avoidance. It is knowing how to maintain a quiet space for oneself amidst the currents of life, allowing the heart to find peace. When the mind is at ease, we truly see the value of each present moment, appreciate what we have, and can live a genuinely happy life. There are days when we step out and see only busy, hurried people. Some worry about making a living, others chase fame, and still others are absorbed in calculations and comparisons. Sometimes you might ask yourself why some people, not wealthy at all, even struggling for their daily bread, always have a bright smile on their faces, while we, who have much more than them, still feel a heavy sense of unease. This is a very real paradox of life. That is because happiness is not measured by the amount of money in our pockets, but by the serenity in our souls. The Buddha once taught that if the mind is not at peace, even mountains of gold and silver cannot bring contentment. But when the mind is tranquil, a simple bowl of rice and vegetables is enough to warm the heart. The root cause of unease, when viewed through the Buddha's teachings, always stems from a restless mind. We often mistakenly believe that having a lot of money will free us from suffering. But in reality, excessive craving creates new suffering. The Four Noble Truths taught by the Buddha are the foundation for recognizing this. Suffering is an obvious truth. The cause of suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. To end suffering, these roots must be eliminated. And the path to ending suffering is to live according to the Noble Eightfold Path. Only when no longer bound by greed and when accepting impermanence can we truly feel peace. There's a story that the channel Fat Phap Lin Ung wants to share about Mr. Hoa, a man who worked as a trishaw driver. His life was very simple. He hauled a few small loads a day, earning enough for his family's meals. In lucky months, he had enough for rent. In difficult months, he might be a few days late. Yet, he always had a smile on his face. People often saw him driving his trishaw and quietly singing, sometimes stopping at a red light to chat and laugh with the child lottery ticket vendors. Once, someone asked him, "You work so hard, barely having enough to eat. How can you always smile?" Mr. Hoa just smiled and replied, "As long as I have the strength to drive, food for my wife and children, and a peaceful night's sleep, I feel happy. Worrying won't fill my pockets, so I might as well live joyfully." That simple, rustic answer left many people silently contemplating. Indeed, in his poverty, Mr. Hoa found simple happiness. He didn't wait for grand things to feel joy, but appreciated every meal and every peaceful moment. It was the inner tranquility of his mind that helped him overcome hardship without faltering. His happiness didn't come from material possessions, but from a contented mind, a pure mind. Meanwhile, on another side of the city, there was Mr. Tuan, a wealthy business owner. He had a grand house, luxury cars, and so much money in the bank that he couldn't spend it all, even if he tried for a lifetime. But everyone who knew him knew he rarely got a full night's sleep. During the day, he was busy with contracts and projects, constantly fearing losses, worrying about employee betrayal, and rival competitors. At night, while others slept soundly, he tossed and turned, anxious about fluctuating gold prices and an unstable market. The more money he had, the more worries he accumulated. He could enjoy an extravagant feast with every delicacy imaginable, but found no appetite. He could travel all over the world, yet his heart remained heavy with anxiety. Comparing these two lives, we clearly see that true happiness does not depend on status or wealth, but on the peace within the mind. Mr. Hoa was poor, but at peace. Mr. Tuan was rich, but uneasy. One smiled lightly amidst hardship, while the other was weighed down by affluence. This contrast is a vivid testament to the Buddha's teaching that if the mind is pure, one remains at peace regardless of circumstances. But if the mind is agitated, even with the whole world in one's hands, one will still feel unhappy. Buddhist teachings delve deeper into the root of this difference. Mr. Hoa could be cheerful because he knew how to accept and be content with what he had, a concept known in Buddhism as the mind of contentment. A contented person feels at ease even lying on the ground. In contrast, a greedy person, even sitting on a throne, will never be satisfied. Meanwhile, Mr. Tuan was bound by his own greed and fear. He feared loss, scarcity, and not being able to keep what he had, and this very fear turned him into a prisoner of his own wealth. This is also a lesson in karma, cause and effect. For those who live in ambition, the only results they receive are exhaustion and unease. If one wishes to escape this vicious cycle, the Buddha's teachings are the guiding light. He shows us that to achieve peace, we need to return to ourselves, learning to quiet the mind. Practicing mindfulness, knowing when to pause to take a deep breath and recognize life in every moment, is the first step. When the mind settles, we will clearly see that happiness is not far away, but right here in the present moment. Letting go of ambition, being grateful for small things, and opening our hearts to love others, that is the path to nurturing purity. The listener can try to imagine if each day we began with a mindful breath, a silent invocation of the Buddha, instead of being hurriedly swept away by work, our minds would be very different. When we can smile, even at a morning sunbeam, or give thanks for a meal, simple yet sufficient, our hearts will feel a little more at peace. Accumulating these small moments, we will realize that peace and ease have always been within us, just waiting for us to turn back and touch them. Thus, through the stories of Mr. Hoa and Mr. Tuan, we clearly see that happiness is not about having a lot, but about a pure mind. The poor can be happy because they are content. The rich can suffer because they never stop. The lesson here is that if we want a joyful life, we must learn to cultivate a peaceful mind. And when the mind is awakened, the heart will be at peace. Life will naturally be joyful. True happiness comes from inner tranquility. Dear friend, perhaps each of us has at least once sat alone and wondered, why does my heart feel so uneasy? Why does life sometimes feel lacking, even when it's abundant? Why are we always preoccupied with worries, fears, sorrows, and anger? Sometimes, looking back, we realize that people today seem busier with more material possessions, yet their minds are more unsettled than ever. We easily fall into states of restlessness, anger, envy, and fear of loss. These things keep our hearts from ever finding peace. The Buddha once taught that to find the path to peace, one must first look deeply into the cause of suffering. Only by identifying the root causes can we find a way to heal. From the perspective of Buddhist teachings, the root causes that make the mind uneasy are greed, hatred, and delusion, accompanied by envy and excessive worry. Greed makes us want to possess more than we need, leading us to never feel sufficient. Hatred makes us prone to anger and resentment, keeping the mind agitated and far from peace. Delusion blinds us, preventing us from understanding the nature of impermanence and karma. So we often seek happiness in places that cannot provide true happiness. Envy causes us to look at others' happiness and compare it to our own, thereby giving rise to suffering. And excessive worry traps us in a future that has not yet arrived, binding us to fear. As long as these root causes persist, no matter what we achieve, our hearts will remain uneasy. Imagine someone who has just lost money. If their heart is full of greed, the suffering won't stop at just the loss, but will also bring resentment, suspicion, and fear. Or, when a relationship ends, people often drown in sorrow, not only because of the separation, but also because of envy, comparison, and blame. When facing loss, many feel their lives collapse, losing all direction because their minds are dominated by fear, blame, and a lack of faith. Every loss in life is merely an event, but it is how our minds react that determines whether we endure prolonged suffering. There's a relatable story about Ms. Lan, a woman in her early 30s. She used to work as an accountant for a small company. Though the job wasn't lucrative, it was enough for her to support her family. One day, the company went bankrupt, and she lost her job. Initially, she was very confused. From morning till night, she sat dazed, her heart filled with anxiety. She feared not having money to pay debts, feared her children would lack necessities, and feared her friends would mock her. During those days, she often snapped at her husband and children, and cried secretly at night. Her mind was like a river swept away by a storm, with no place to anchor. Then, one day, a friend invited her to a Dharma talk at a pagoda. She sat quietly, listening to the venerable teach about the Four Noble Truths. He explained that suffering is an obvious truth that everyone must face. The roots of suffering are greed, hatred, and delusion within each person's mind. The venerable taught, your job loss is merely an event, but the prolonged suffering is because you cling to ambition, resentment, and fear. You think losing your job means losing everything, but in reality, it is just a transition of impermanence. All phenomena change. Nothing maintains a single form forever. If you can see this, your heart will lighten. Hearing that, Ms. Lan shed tears. She suddenly realized that her suffering all those past days was not only due to losing her job, but also because her mind refused to let go. She was greedy, wanting life to always remain the same. She harbored hatred because she resented her boss. And she was deluded because she failed to see that every adverse event also has a brighter side. Once she understood, she began to practice slow breathing, reciting the Buddha's name, and accepting what was happening. Gradually, her heart lightened. She started looking for a new job, and though it was difficult, she was no longer despairing. Instead of worrying, she spent more time with her family. She realized that as long as she was healthy and had love, she could always start anew. Ms. Lan's story is also the story of many of us. Sometimes, an event in life makes us think we've lost everything. But the truth is, it's our perspective that determines whether we suffer or find peace. The Buddha taught, look deeply into the root of suffering, and you will find the way to heal. When we examine our own minds, we realize that greed, hatred, delusion, envy, and excessive worry are the true causes of our unease, not external circumstances. So, how do we heal? The answer is to return to practicing the Dharma every day. First, learn to let go of excessive craving. When we know how to stop and be content with what we have, our hearts will feel lighter. Next, learn to dissolve hatred with compassion. When someone hurts us, instead of harboring resentment, consider that they, too, are human, still full of ignorance, and themselves suffering. Instead of delusively chasing illusions, we learn to clearly see impermanence and accept all changes. To counteract envy, we learn to rejoice in others' happiness, seeing their joy as our own. And to reduce worries, we learn to live in the present, breathe deeply, and be grateful for every moment. A simple practice is that whenever the mind is uneasy, sit down, close your eyes, and recite the Buddha's name. Each recitation is like a drop of water, gradually settling the turbidity in the mind. If this habit is maintained daily, we will find our minds more stable, less swept away by life's storms. Additionally, generosity, doing good deeds, and helping others are also very effective ways to heal unease. When we bring joy to others, our own hearts instantly feel relieved. Through all these things, we understand that unease does not come from external sources, but from within the mind itself. Only when we identify the cause can we truly transform. A mind that knows how to stop, reflect, and let go is capable of achieving peace. When we examine the root causes of unease, we find the path to healing. Perhaps everyone in life has at least once lost their temper, become frustrated, or even allowed anger to sweep them away, saying or doing things they shouldn't. Sometimes it's just an unintentional word spoken in a fit of rage, but the consequence leaves deep wounds in others' hearts. Other times, it's just a momentary lack of self-control. But then one carries regret for a lifetime. People often say that anger makes one lose wisdom. And indeed, when anger flares up, we are no longer clear-headed enough to distinguish right from wrong, or benefit from harm. We act as if consumed by a fire within our minds. And then, that very fire burns away our own peace. In daily life, many have lost precious relationships simply because they couldn't control their anger. Some have shattered family happiness due to anger. Some have lost jobs because of their temper. Some have destroyed close friendships over a moment of irritation. All these things stem from a simple but painful truth. When we are angry, no one suffers first more than ourselves. The Buddha once taught that anger is like a fire. If we don't control it, it will burn away our merits and destroy our peace. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "One who lives in hatred does not see the truth. One who lives in hatred does not maintain mindfulness. One who lives in hatred cannot abide in concentration. One who lives in hatred does not see liberation." These teachings are a warning to each of us that hatred not only causes suffering in the present life, but also obscures the path to liberation, keeping the mind perpetually uneasy. There's a relatable story that might make us ponder a lot. It's the story of Mr. Phuc, a man who lost a 10-year friendship due to a single fit of anger. Mr. Phuc was naturally gentle and approachable, always well-liked by his friends. Among them was a close friend from college. The two regarded each other as brothers. However, during a difficult time, his friend borrowed a significant sum of money and hadn't yet repaid it. At first, Mr. Fuchs patiently waited, trusting his friend would soon return the money. But as time passed, his worries about money grew, and resentment and doubt began to surface in his heart. Then, during a gathering, upon seeing his friend still at ease, with no sign of repayment, the anger within him erupted. Mr. Fuchs unleashed harsh, critical, and heavy words. In his rage, he said things that deeply hurt his friend. The friend, proud and feeling insulted, immediately stood up and left. From then on, the two ceased contact. A 10-year bond of friendship, filled with countless memories, shattered over a few angry words. Afterward, when the anger subsided, Mr. Fuchs sat alone and realized that he had lost far more than the money. After all, money could be earned back, but a true friendship was not easily found. Sitting in the empty room, his heart was filled with a choking emptiness and regret. Mr. Fuchs' story is like many other stories in life. When angry, we think we're venting our frustration onto others. But in reality, the first one to be burned is our own soul. Our heart beats faster, breath quickens, mind becomes clouded, and heart feels uneasy. Anger not only causes mental suffering, but also affects physical health. Those who live in hatred for extended periods often develop illnesses ranging from high blood pressure and heart disease to memory loss. Therefore, anger not only consumes relationships and merits, but also burns away both body and mind. The profound cause of anger, when viewed through Buddhist teachings, all stems from greed, hatred, and delusion. When we crave something and it doesn't go as desired, we easily become hateful. When we cling to an overly large ego, we are easily hurt and react violently. When we don't clearly see impermanence, failing to realize that all things change, we easily hold on to frustration and resentment. All these things make our minds uneasy. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "Though one may conquer 1,000 times 1,000 men in battle, yet he is the greatest victor who conquers himself." Indeed, if we can conquer our own anger, that is the greatest victory. Because anger is not brought by anyone else, but is a flame that flares up from our own minds. Others may sow a spark, but we are the ones who allow it to ignite. If we know how to stop, take a deep breath, and smile, that fire will gradually subside. To counter anger, the Buddha taught us to cultivate a mind of compassion. When we look at others with love, we will be less angry. The friend who hasn't repaid the money might genuinely be facing difficulties. A loved one who speaks harsh words might be suffering inwardly. If we put ourselves in their shoes, we will lessen our blame and increase our understanding. When we arouse compassion, it's as if we're pouring a cool stream of water onto the fire of hatred, soothing all the unease in our minds. Furthermore, practicing mindfulness is also very important when anger arises. We often get swept away and forget that we are angry. If, at that moment, we manage to stop and acknowledge, "I am angry," that is already the first step toward awakening. Just by being aware of our emotions, the anger has already weakened by half. Afterward, we can sit still, breathe slowly, and silently recite the Buddha's name, allowing the energy of compassion to help us calm down. The Fat Phap Lin Ung channel wants you to remember that everything in life is impermanent. Today, we might be angry with someone over a small matter, but tomorrow, they might be gone forever. We won't have the chance to offer forgiveness. At that point, the regret will be 100 times more painful than today's anger. Therefore, what's important is not winning or losing an argument, but maintaining peace in our hearts and preserving precious relationships. Life is inherently short. No one knows what tomorrow holds. Instead of living in anger, let us choose to live with forbearance. Instead of letting anger destroy happiness, let us choose silence, a smile, and yielding. Because ultimately, the one who benefits is ourselves. A peaceful soul, a heart full of love, that is the most priceless treasure. It can be said that anger is a prilipura that consumes us. Only when we learn to control our anger, use compassion to cool it, and use mindfulness to illuminate it, can we maintain a still mind, a peaceful heart, and a truly joyful life. The lesson from Mr. Fuchs' story is that losing money is not as frightening as losing a friendship. But losing inner peace is the greatest loss. Therefore, do not let anger hijack your joy. Let compassion nourish your soul. And remember, when you can let go of anger, life will naturally become lighter and happier. The final message to convey is, do not let anger master your life. For only when the mind is still can the heart be at peace and life truly joyful. In daily life, perhaps many of us have woken up in the morning, sighed, and then muttered a complaint like, "Another tiring day begins." This seemingly harmless statement is actually like a suggestion that plants a heavy seed in our minds, causing the entire day to pass in weariness and despondency. Conversely, there are also those who, upon opening their eyes, first smile and silently say, "Thank you, that today I am still alive, still breathing, still have the opportunity to love." Just one different thought in the morning can steer their entire day in two opposite directions, one of fatigue and dissatisfaction, the other of joy and gratitude. This makes us realize a truth. Human thought has immense power. It not only determines our emotions for a day, but can also shape an entire life. The Buddha once taught that mind is the forerunner of all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are mind-made. If with an impure mind one speaks or acts, suffering follows him, like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. If with a pure mind one speaks or acts, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves. This teaching affirms that our thoughts and attitudes are the roots that create either suffering or happiness. If the mind thinks kindly, life is serene. If the mind thinks negatively, life is uneasy. The way we face each event in life is actually more important than the event itself. Many people often believe that their suffering comes from external circumstances, from others, from material deprivation, or from unavoidable losses. But if we reflect deeper, we will see that some people living in poverty can still smile gently and optimistically. Meanwhile, some wealthy and affluent individuals are perpetually sorrowful and uneasy. This demonstrates that it is not circumstances that determine happiness, but rather our mindset, the way we perceive issues, that decides our joy or suffering. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering is inherently part of the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha pointed out the truth that life is suffering, but he also clearly indicated its cause and the path to liberation from suffering. The root causes are greed, hatred, and delusion within the mind, and the path to liberation is to practice cultivating the mind. Positive thinking, or in Buddhist terms, right thought, kan tudui, is the first step to changing one's life. When we cultivate wholesome thoughts, when we are grateful instead of complaining, when we view everything with a compassionate eye instead of being strict, then gradually the mind will become calmer and the heart more peaceful. There's an everyday story that will help us feel the power of positive thinking more clearly. It's the story of Ms. May, a simple woman who worked at a small shop. Previously, Ms. May often started her day with a sigh. As soon as she opened her eyes, she thought of the arduous tasks awaiting her, the difficult customers she would have to face, and the financial shortcomings. She would complain, "Another hard day." These complaints became a recurring habit for many years, leaving her constantly feeling despondent and weary. Not only was she exhausted, but even those around her were affected by the negative energy radiating from her. One day, she happened to be invited by a friend to a Dharma talk. During the lecture, the Venerable spoke about the power of thought, saying, "Every morning, if you complain, another difficult day, you are painting a gloomy picture for yourself. But if you say, 'Thank you, because today I am still Amaya, I have the opportunity to work, to love,' then that day will become a gift. What you think, you will become." Those teachings awakened Ms. Mai, and she began to try to change. The next morning, upon waking, she smiled and told herself, "Thank you that today I am still alive. I have another day to love, to work, to enjoy." Just one sentence, and her heart suddenly felt lighter. She went to work with a comfortable mindset, meeting customers more pleasantly and cheerfully. Gradually, this habit became a part of her life. And strangely, as her mind changed, her life around her also changed. Her husband, seeing his wife happy, became less irritable. Her children, seeing their mother optimistic, also adopted that spirit. Her small shop gradually attracted more customers, and work became smoother. Miss Mai realized that thinking shaped emotions, and emotions, in turn, shaped life. That story is not just Ms. Mai's alone, but could be all of ours. Because in life, every day, we have the right to choose how we think. We can choose to complain, lament, and then sink into fatigue. But we can also choose gratitude, choose to look at the positive side, and then find life lighter. This very choice determines whether we are people who suffer or people who are happy. In the scriptures, the Buddha once said, "What you think, you become." This may sound simple, but if we reflect deeply, we will see it contains immense power. Someone who thinks they are unhappy will act like an unhappy person. Someone who thinks they are happy will live like a happy person. Thoughts lead to words. Words lead to actions. Actions become habits, and habits form destiny. Therefore, changing destiny is not about searching far and wide, but about starting with changing one's own mindset. Of course, life isn't always smooth sailing, making it easy to be optimistic. There will be days filled with difficulties, painful losses that make us want to give up. But precisely in those moments, maintaining a positive mindset becomes even more crucial. Because when we view problems with a disheartened mind, we will only see more dead ends. Conversely, when we maintain an optimistic spirit, we will find a way out. Positive thinking isn't pretending that everything is fine, but choosing to face difficulties with courage and the belief that we can overcome them. There's a small exercise that anyone can practice, changing the language we use every day. Instead of complaining, "I'm so tired today," try saying, "Today, I am grateful that I still have the health to work." Instead of complaining, "Everyone makes me sad," try saying, "I am grateful that I have the opportunity to learn patience." These positive words are seeds sown into the mind, and those seeds will sprout into joy. In the practice of spiritual cultivation, positive thinking, or right thought, chan tu dui, is a part of the noble eightfold path. When we cultivate right thought, we don't allow negative thoughts to overwhelm us. We learn to illuminate with wisdom, to view life through the lens of impermanence. When we understand that suffering is also just a part of the impermanent flow, we will no longer harbor excessive resentment, but instead appreciate the peaceful moments we have. If each of us develops the habit of positive thinking, gradually, society as a whole will have less resentment and hatred. Any family that sows words of gratitude and love each morning will be filled with happiness. If everyone learns to see the good in each other, this world will have less suffering and more peace and joy. Positive thinking is not a magic spell that can completely change circumstances, but it is the key that opens the door to inner peace. And when the mind is at peace, external circumstances will also feel lighter. As people often say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. In conclusion, the lesson from Ms. Mai's story clearly shows us that a positive thought can change an entire life. Therefore, practice sowing seeds of optimism, gratitude, and love into your mind. Because when we think good thoughts, we will live virtuously. And when we live virtuously, happiness will naturally find its way to us. Have you noticed that in life, people often find it very easy to see the faults of others, but difficult to recognize their own shortcomings? We often want to win, to prove ourselves superior, to assert our place in life, but rarely are willing to sit down and confront the weaknesses and bad habits that subtly control us every day. The ancients often said that the greatest victory is self-conquest. And in the scriptures, the Buddha also taught that conquering 1,000 armies on the battlefield is not equal to conquering oneself. This is because external enemies may one day depart, but internal enemies, greed, hatred, delusion, bad habits, and negative thoughts, cling to us every second, every minute, and are not easily let go of. In modern life, we often think that success means overcoming difficulties, struggling to gain a foothold, or surpassing others. But how many people can conquer their own quick temper when insulted? How many dare to give up a bad habit, even knowing it is destroying their body and soul? How many can smile and let go when envy and jealousy arise? These are truly the toughest battles, where each person is their own adversary. If we look deeply into Buddhist teachings, we will see that the root of these internal battles is ignorance. Because we do not clearly understand the truth of life, we chase desires, leading to an accumulation of suffering. The Buddha taught that humans suffer because the mind is still attached, still dominated by greed, hatred, and delusion. Each person's karma does not arise spontaneously. It forms from habits, from small, repeated actions, like a person addicted to smoking. Initially, it's just a few cigarettes to try. Then it gradually becomes a habit, eventually turning into shackles that bind both body and mind. Often, we know something is harmful, but the ingrained tendency within is too strong for us to easily let go. Therefore, to conquer oneself, one must have wisdom to illuminate and possess perseverance and patience. The Fat Phap Lin Ung channel recalls a story about Mr. Nam, a middle-aged man who had been addicted to smoking for 15 years. Initially, he smoked just to relax and fit in with friends, but gradually, cigarettes became a psychological crutch. When stressed, he turned to cigarettes. When bored, he lit one up. When happy, he also considered smoking a habit to celebrate his joy. Thus, cigarettes became an indispensable companion. But the price he paid was too high. He frequently suffered from a dry cough, shortness of breath, and his health steadily deteriorated. His family, wife, and children advised him many times, but he still lacked the determination to quit. Until one day, he happened to hear a Dharma talk, where the Venerable reiterated the Buddha's teaching. A brave person is not one who defeats others, but one who conquers oneself. That statement startled him. He realized that for all those years, he had never conquered himself. He had allowed a small cigarette to control both his body and mind. He saw himself as a loser in his own daily life. And from that moment, he resolved to change. The first days of quitting smoking were a fierce battle. His body yearned, and his mind constantly recalled the taste of smoke. At times, he trembled with agitation to the point of wanting to give up. But then he practiced sitting down, closing his eyes, and breathing deeply. He remembered the Venerable's teaching that when a craving for tobacco arises, look directly at it, without denying it, running from it, or indulging it. Just take a deep breath, exhale slowly, and silently tell yourself, this craving is only temporary. It will pass, like clouds in the sky. Initially, sitting still like that was very difficult because his mind constantly screamed for it, but he persevered day after day. Each time the craving came, he sat still and observed it. A week, 2 weeks, then a month passed, and the craving for cigarettes was no longer as intense as before. Instead, he felt a gentle peace. His body gradually became healthier, his sleep deeper, and his mind clearer. He realized that the greatest victory in his life was not how much money he earned or outperforming anyone in society, but rather conquering the bad habit that had bound him for 15 years. Mr. Nam's story is clear proof that when we have enough courage to turn and face ourselves, we will see that all bonds can be undone. Conquering oneself is not a task for a single day or two. It is a long journey, requiring perseverance and daily mindfulness. But once achieved, we will feel a freedom greater than any victory in the outside world. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha emphasized, by oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil avoided. By oneself is one purified. Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. This shows that on the path to conquering oneself, no one can substitute or do it for another. A teacher can point the way, Friends can offer encouragement, but only we ourselves can walk the path and let go. So, how can each of us practice conquering ourselves in daily life? First, we need to learn to slow down and take time to observe ourselves. When angry, instead of reacting immediately, pause for a breath and ask yourself, where does this anger come from? Is it worth losing my peace over? When you feel envy, remind yourself that the other person has their own merits. Turn back to cultivating your own blessings. When you find yourself drawn to a bad habit, try replacing it with a good habit, however small, like reading a page of scripture, sitting still for 5 minutes, or simply smiling in gratitude. Second, practice meditation, because meditation is a mirror that helps us clearly see our inner self. In moments of stillness, we clearly see how many distracting thoughts are arising. When we see clearly, we know how to let go. Meditation is not just about sitting cross-legged. It can be any moment when we live fully in the present, from washing dishes, walking, to drinking a cup of tea. Living mindfully is the foundation of self-conquest. Third, have faith and patience, because bad habits cannot be changed overnight. Sometimes we will stumble and relapse, but the important thing is not to give up, but to keep getting back up and persevering. Just like Mr. Nam, who almost gave up at one point, but through persistence, ultimately succeeded. If you are struggling with your own inner difficulties, remember that you are not alone. Everyone in life has their own battle. Some must conquer anger, others laziness, some greed, others fear. This battle makes no distinction between rich and poor or status. Everyone must go through it and conquer themselves. That is the noblest victory, leading us to true freedom and peace. Therefore, practice turning back and reflecting on yourself. Be courageous in confronting and patient in transforming. Because only when we master our minds can we truly master our lives. Conquering oneself is not to prove anything to others, but for ourselves to live a peaceful and happy life. Have you noticed that in daily life, one of the constant sufferings of people is comparison? We often look at others. Seeing them superior in appearance makes us feel inferior. Seeing them richer makes us sad. Seeing them loved makes envy arise in our hearts. Often, it is precisely these petty comparisons that rob our hearts of peace and leave our minds agitated. Human suffering comes not only from material deprivation, but also from envy, from constantly feeling inferior to others. People often say comparison is the thief of joy. Because once we allow ourselves to fall into the spiral of envy, the happiness inherent in the present moment will be stolen. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering lies in ignorance and craving. Ignorance prevents us from clearly seeing the truth that everyone has their own karmic blessings and consequences. Craving makes us constantly want to be equal to or better than others, not accepting ourselves as we are. When we see others succeed, instead of feeling sympathetic joy, we feel envy. When we see others happy, instead of being happy for them, we feel a pang in our hearts. From there, envy arises, leading us into a spiral of hatred, dissatisfaction, and even creating negative karma through words and wrong actions. In reality, envy and admiration are just two different reactions to the same situation: seeing someone else excel. Some react with jealousy, while others respond with admiration and a desire to learn. An envious person will find the other's excellence a thorn in their eye, constantly wanting to undermine them and prove themselves more worthy. In contrast, someone who knows how to admire will use it as a mirror to reflect on themselves, striving for further improvement. One leads to an uneasy mind, the other to positive motivation. One leads us away from joy, the other opens a path to growth. The choice of which path to take lies within our own minds. The Fat Phap Lin Ung channel recalls the story of Ms. Han, a longtime office worker. At her company, she always considered herself diligent and hardworking, but then felt frustrated when her colleague, Tao, was promoted. Initially, Ms. Han felt unconvinced. She thought Tao was just lucky or favored by superiors. Every day at work, Ms. Han felt increasingly exasperated, seeing Tao smiling and chatting with everyone, which stirred up an unpleasant feeling in her heart. At times, she even secretly wished Tao would make a mistake to prove that the promotion was undeserved. But this discomfort didn't make her happier. On the contrary, it made her work more stressful and weighed heavily on her spirit. One day, by chance, during a meeting, Ms. Han was assigned to work with Tao. It was when working closely that she realized Tao was not only professionally competent, but also skilled at communication, listening, and caring for colleagues. Tao often stayed late to complete shared tasks and was always willing to help others in need. Upon seeing these silent efforts, Ms. Han suddenly had an awakening. It turned out that all along, she had been viewing things with a distorted perception. Tao's promotion was not just due to luck, but also to her persistence and positive work attitude. From then on, Ms. Han changed her perspective. Instead of being jealous, she began to observe how Tao worked and how she interacted with others. She learned to listen more and to prioritize common interests over her personal ego. She also gradually became more open and friendly with her colleagues. After some time, she felt her work suddenly became lighter and her colleagues grew to appreciate her more. And then, an opportunity arose. She was recognized by her superiors and promoted amidst everyone's congratulations. At that moment, Ms. Han truly understood the lesson. When we admire and learn, success will naturally come. But when we envy, we only harm ourselves. Ms. Han's story is not uncommon in life. How many times have we let jealousy blind us, instead of seeing the good in others to learn from? An envious person always sees others' happiness and success as a shadow weighing them down. But a person who knows how to admire sees it as a guiding light. And their paths diverge from the very moment the thought arises in their mind. The Buddha taught that within each person's mind are seeds of wholesome and unwholesome qualities. Whichever seed is watered will grow strong. When we nurture envy, we are sowing unwholesome seeds that make our hearts narrower and deplete our blessings. When we nurture admiration, we are sowing wholesome seeds, expanding our hearts and creating more positive karmic connections. And the wonderful thing is that when we genuinely rejoice in others' success, we automatically find joy within ourselves. So in life, if you see others more skilled than yourself, try to pause for a moment to observe. Ask yourself if there's anything good you can learn from them. Instead of blaming yourself or fate, see it as a reminder to strive harder. Each person has their own path and unique karmic connections. Harboring envy only leads us astray, while harboring admiration helps us advance further. A simple practice to transform the mind of envy is to cultivate sympathetic joy, mudita. When you see someone perform a good deed and receive blessings, mentally join your palms and silently wish them well. When you see someone succeed, silently think, may they continue to prosper. May I also have the opportunity to learn and improve. Gradually, your mind will open, your heart will lighten, and joy will become your companion. Perhaps you've experienced a pang of sadness seeing friends succeed while you haven't. Perhaps you felt discontent when others were praised and you weren't. But remember, everyone has their own blessings, and your path is not necessarily the same as theirs. Instead of letting yourself slide into envy, choose admiration and learning. That very choice will determine whether you find peace or suffering. What is important is not whether we are better than others, but whether we can maintain inner peace. If our mind is clear, our heart will naturally be at peace, and life will be joyful. And one way to clarify the mind is to let go of envy and cultivate genuine admiration. In today's life, everyone seems to be in a rush, rushing to make money, rushing to assert themselves, rushing to outdo each other in every small way. But precisely in that whirlwind, we gradually lose simple, unadorned, yet immensely precious qualities, such as kindness. Have you ever noticed that just a smile, a kind inquiry, or a small act of help is enough to warm someone's heart? Yet, the paradox is that while everyone yearns to receive kindness, very few are willing to open their hearts and give first. Everyone is busy, everyone is tired, everyone fears that giving will lead to disadvantage, and so people's hearts gradually close up, society becomes colder, and sorrows and anxieties accumulate even more. The Buddha once taught that all sentient beings are equal in compassion. This means from infants to the elderly, from the poor to the wealthy, all need love. Kindness makes no distinction of status or social standing, for compassion is what binds humanity together. When you extend kindness, you not only help others find peace, but in that very moment, you are also healing your own soul. The profound reason why people today are often restless, easily angered, and easily exhausted is due to a selfish mind. An inflated ego always wants to keep more for itself. When we see others having good fortune, we feel uneasy. When we see others in difficulty, instead of offering a helping hand, we think it's their problem, unrelated to us. It is this discriminatory mind that makes our hearts increasingly barren and cold. Buddhist teachings clearly state that a selfish mind creates negative karma, and negative karma leads to suffering. Conversely, when we cultivate kindness, we are sowing the seeds of happiness. Kindness is the root of peace, for only when we know how to love others does our heart become less narrow, less competitive, and less calculating. There's a small everyday story that the Fat Phap Lin Ung channel wants to recount. It's about Uncle Tu, a farmer living in a poor rural area. That day, it rained heavily, making the dirt road muddy and slippery. As Uncle Tu was cycling along, he saw an elderly woman fall off her bicycle right in front of him. At that moment, no one else was around, only heavy rain pouring down. Many people might have hurried past, thinking that helping the old woman would be troublesome, getting wet, and dirtying their clothes. But Uncle Tu didn't hesitate. He immediately propped up his bike, rushed over to help her up, shielded her from the rain, and then helped her home, The elderly woman was deeply moved, tears streaming down her face as she thanked Uncle Tai. That evening, as he lay down to rest, Uncle Tu felt an unusually warm feeling in his heart. He slept soundly, free from the worries he usually had. Just a small act had brought him immense peace and joy. As we see, kindness doesn't demand anything profound. It's merely a sympathetic look, a helping hand, a sharing in times of difficulty. But its power is immense because it can touch human hearts, dispelling the coldness that often pervades society. Those who are helped find happiness, and those who help find peace. In Buddhist scriptures, it is taught that you reap what you sow. When we sow kindness, the karmic result is not only that others love and respect us, but also inner serenity. A person who consistently lives kindly will rarely feel frustrated or lonely. Conversely, those who only live for themselves, only accumulating for personal gain, no matter how much money they have, will easily feel empty and uneasy inside. Sometimes, lying down at night, their hearts are full of worries and anxieties, leading to sleeplessness and even illness. The most precious thing about kindness is that it doesn't require preparation or specific conditions. It can appear in an instant. You see a child struggling with a heavy bike on their way home from school. You can help them. You see someone struggling to carry bulky items. You can lend a hand. You see a tired colleague. You can ask how they are and share a moment. Each small act like this, seemingly insignificant, contributes to making the world a warmer and more beautiful place. To cultivate kindness, the Buddha taught us to practice letting go of selfishness and opening our hearts. When we think less about our own ego, we will have more space to think about others. When we compare and calculate less about gains and losses, we will more easily extend kindness. And when we cling less to trivial matters, we will find our hearts lighter, unburdened. Practicing this is not difficult. We just need to remind ourselves each day to be a little kinder. You can start by practicing listening, because listening is an expression of kindness. Listening is not just hearing with your ears, but listening with your whole heart. When you truly listen, you will understand the suffering of others, and from that, you will feel more compassion instead of blame. When your mind knows compassion, you will naturally find ways to help and share. And in that process, you are also sowing blessings for yourself, sowing long-lasting peace for yourself. Try once to put yourself in the shoes of the vulnerable, and you will understand the value of kindness. When you grow old, with weak legs and difficulty walking, you will wish for someone to support you. When you are sad with loss, you will wish for a comforting hand. When you are suffering, you will wish for a word of solace. And if you wish to receive these things, why do you hesitate to give them to others? Kindness is not a luxury, but a part of human nature. It is merely obscured by the dust of greed, selfishness, and envy. When you clear away that dust, kindness will naturally shine forth. That is also how you find peace within your own mind. When you sow kindness, you are sowing wholesome seeds, and one day those seeds will bear fruit, bringing you a season of peace and joy. For kindness is never lost. It merely transforms into positive energy that returns to you. So, don't hesitate any longer. Live kindly today, because you are not only making this world a better place, but more importantly, you are making your own heart more peaceful. And when the mind is at peace, life will be joyful. That is what the Buddha always reminds us. In this life, one of humanity's greatest sufferings is excessive craving. Some long for wealth, others for fame, and still others for a harmonious love life and a happy family. However, the more one craves, the more one worries. The more one desires, the more one fears loss. When things don't go as desired, vexations immediately arise. And when they are attained, one then worries intensely, fearing they might slip away one day. It is this clinging, craving mind that plunges us into an unending spiral of suffering. Some people spend their entire lives vying for superiority, only to end up with exhaustion and no peace. There are those who desperately cling to things that are not inherently theirs, and the harder they cling, the more they suffer. This is because they haven't understood the two words tui duyen, dependent origination, adapt to circumstances. In Buddhist teachings, tui duyen does not mean giving up or letting life take its course. Rather, it means living in harmony with causes and conditions, accepting impermanence, and remaining at peace amidst gains and losses, ups and downs. The Buddha once taught that everything in life arises from causes and conditions. When conditions converge, things will manifest. When conditions disperse, things will cease. Humans can sow seeds and create wholesome conditions, but they cannot force outcomes to unfold according to their will. If we understand this, we will live more freely, no longer bound by gains and losses. The reason people often feel uneasy in adversity is due to an excessively strong mind of attachment. We tend to think that everything must go our way, that we must keep everything we desire. But the Buddha taught that life is inherently impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. What we have today, we might lose tomorrow. Those who are with us today might depart tomorrow. If we understand the principle of impermanence, we will see that everything coming or going is natural. And when we adapt to circumstances, tui duyen, we no longer suffer from clinging, but instead feel light and at peace. There is a simple story that holds a profound lesson about adapting to circumstances, tui duyen. It's about Uncle Ba, a gentle farmer in a rural area. Uncle Ba lived by farming, toiling under the sun and sky year-round. However, one year brought a prolonged drought, and the crops failed. Many in the village blamed fate, complaining to heaven and earth. Some even became so depressed they fell ill. But Uncle Ba was different. Although he also suffered losses, he did not resent or complain. He told his neighbors that if heaven didn't grant a good harvest this season, they had to find another way. Complaining wouldn't solve anything. So he took on odd hours, carrying bricks and plastering walls, doing whatever work he could find. Thanks to his diligence and hard work, he saved a sum of money. Later, he bought a few cows to raise. A few years later, the herd multiplied, and his family's economy became more stable than even in previous bumper harvest seasons. If that year Uncle Ba had complained about fate and given up in despair, he probably would never have had the chance to change. But thanks to his mind of tui duyen, knowing how to adapt to circumstances, he found a new direction, turning hardship into opportunity. Everyone in the village looked on with admiration, while Uncle Ba just smiled gently, saying that what comes, we accept. What goes, we let go. If we live simply and work hard, good results will come sooner or later. Through Uncle Ba's story, we clearly see that tui juin is not surrendering to fate, but living with a calm attitude, without resentment or self-pity. Toi duin also does not mean being passive. On the contrary, it is actively adapting and being flexible in all situations. When a condition ceases, we do not cling to it, but we can open ourselves to another. And it is this acceptance, this openness, that helps us find peace and grow. In this life, everyone will face losses. Some lose money, some lose relationships, some lose opportunities. If we keep resenting and agonizing, we only torment ourselves. The Buddha taught that much of suffering comes from our inability to accept reality. We constantly wish life to be as we desire, but life is constantly changing, impermanent. When we understand tui duin, we will know how to smile in the face of adversity. Perhaps today we fail, but who knows? Tomorrow, that might be an opportunity for us to grow stronger. Perhaps today we lose a relationship, but who knows? That might open a door to something new and better. So how can we practice the mind of tui duin in daily life? First, we need to learn to let go of attachment. Don't consider everything we have to be permanent, because nothing in this world is certain. Practice viewing everything with a mind aware of impermanence, so that when things change, we are not shocked or distressed. Second, practice living in the present. Many people often grieve over the past, worry about the future, and forget that the present moment is the most precious condition. When we live fully in each moment, our souls will not be dragged along by desires. Third, sow wholesome seeds every day. When we live kindly and virtuously, no matter how circumstances change, we will always find peace, for wholesome results will come at the appropriate time. You can practice tui duin with small things in life. For example, when it rains, instead of getting annoyed because plans are canceled, you can use the time at home to rest, read a book, or drink tea. When encountering a setback, instead of blaming yourself or others, you can view it as a lesson for growth. When a relationship ends, instead of suffering, you can be grateful that the person gave you memories and taught you a lesson about love. All these things are tui duin, knowing how to follow nature without forcing. The Buddha once taught that tui duin is a wise way of living. A person who understands tui duin is not caught in the spiral of gain and loss, not bound by the ego. Such a person can live freely in life. Even amidst storms, they still smile, because they understand that everything comes and goes. But if one always maintains inner calm, nothing can cause suffering. The Phat Phap Lin Ung channel wants to send you a simple message. Living tui duin is not giving up, but knowing how to accept, how to turn difficulties into opportunities, and how to smile in the face of change. When you know how to practice tui duin, you will find your heart lightens, no longer fearing impermanence. And it is in that tranquility that you will find true joy. Our lives today, though more convenient than before, seem to be accompanied by increasingly heavy hearts. We have smartphones to connect with the whole world, yet we are increasingly disconnected from ourselves. We have many opportunities for enjoyment and pleasure, but inwardly, we feel lonely and uneasy. Many live amidst bustling city streets, surrounded by laughter and chatter, yet still feel empty, their hearts like a sky full of dark clouds. The truth is that when the mind is not still, nothing can bring complete happiness. The more one seeks joy externally, the more easily one falls into a cycle of weariness. The Buddha taught that true happiness lies not in wealth, power, or fame, but in a heart that knows how to live purely. When the mind is pure, people can still smile, even in poverty. When the mind is pure and nurtured in adversity, one still finds peace. To achieve that purity, the Buddha taught specific, simple paths that anyone can practice in daily life. Among these are 7 precious teachings, likened to 7 lotus flowers, blooming amidst the mud of life, guiding people away from vexations and back to peace and joy. The first teaching is to always remember that purity resides within the mind. People often mistakenly believe that purity must come from external surroundings, that only by dwelling in quiet mountains and forests, or by avoiding worldly strife, can one find peace. But the Buddha taught that the mind is the root of all things. Some live amidst bustling city markets and still find peace because their hearts are steadfast. Conversely, some retreat to the mountains to live as hermits. Yet if their minds are full of ambition and anger, they still suffer. Thus, purity is not about escape, but about mastering one's own mind. The second teaching is to learn to control anger. Anger is like a consuming fire that burns away merits and love. A moment of uncontrolled temper can cause us to utter words that hurt loved ones, leading to lifelong regret. Anger is also like holding a hot coal to throw at someone. But before the coal touches anyone else, our own hand is already burned. Therefore, practitioners need to know how to stop when anger arises, how to breathe deeply, recite the Buddha's name, or meditate to let that fire gradually subside. When anger is controlled, the mind becomes clear, and purity naturally appears. The third teaching is to cultivate positive thinking. In life, there are countless situations that cause us sorrow, but if we allow our minds to wallow in negativity, we will never find peace. The Buddha once taught that the mind is like an artist painting the picture of our own lives. If the mind is full of resentment, that picture will be dark. If the mind is full of hope and love, that picture will be bright. A person who knows how to live positively will see lessons even in hardship and opportunities for growth even in loss. Positive thinking itself is the key that opens the door to happiness. The fourth teaching is to conquer oneself. People often think that success means defeating enemies and overcoming rivals. But the Buddha affirmed that the greatest victory is conquering oneself, conquering greed, selfishness, and delusion. Because external enemies may disappear, but internal enemies of the mind are always subtly present. A person who conquers themselves will no longer be driven by desires, no longer swept away by hatred, but will live steadfastly and freely. The fifth teaching is to replace envy with admiration. In society, everyone desires success and happiness, but when they see others surpass them, many develop jealousy and envy. This envious mind robs us of peace and keeps us in suffering. A person who knows how to practice will view others' success as a source of inspiration to learn and strive harder. When our hearts rejoice in others' happiness, we ourselves get to live in joy. The sixth teaching is to be kind to all. Compassion is not just loving family members, but also knowing how to empathize with those who have hurt us. When we close our hearts, the mind becomes narrow. When we open our hearts, the mind becomes vast. A compassionate person will have less resentment, create less negative karma, and live each day more lightly. The Buddha taught that if you pour a bowl of pure water into a great ocean, it will become one with the ocean. Similarly, if you sow kindness into life, it will spread everywhere, and you yourself will enjoy peace and joy in return. The seventh teaching is to live in harmony with circumstances, tui duyen. Life is inherently impermanent. Everything changes. People often suffer because they want everything to go their way, wanting to hold on to things that cannot be held forever. But when we learn the meaning of tui duyen, knowing how to follow the flow of life without forcing, suffering will dissipate. Tui duyen is not about giving up, but about living wholeheartedly in the present, doing good within one's capacity, and then gently letting go of the results. A person who lives tui duyen is one who knows how to smile in all circumstances. There's a beautiful story about these 7 teachings. In a small town, a group of 7 young friends went to a temple together to learn about Buddhism. Initially, each carried their own worries. One was often angry with family, another was envious of colleagues, and another worried and grieved all day. After hearing the Venerable teach about the 7 Buddha's teachings, they resolved to practice them together. One practiced controlling anger, taking deep breaths and reciting the Buddha's name whenever a temper flared. Another practiced viewing life with a positive outlook, finding good in difficulties. Someone else would sit mindfully each morning, reminding themselves to conquer themselves, not letting desires control them. Others learned to rejoice in their friends' success instead of envying them. Some friends practiced extending kindness, ready to help anyone, and all together practiced living in harmony with circumstances, no longer overly worried about the future or clinging to the past. After some time, the group of friends noticed a wonderful change. They no longer argued, nor did they grieve as much as before. Peace shone in everyone's eyes. Their families were happier, their work felt lighter, and their souls were brighter. The townspeople looked on in surprise, because these 7 young friends always wore gentle, peaceful smiles. It was their practice of the Buddha's teachings that helped them find the path to inner purity. That story shows us that purity is not a distant concept, but is found right in daily life. If we just practice a little, persistently following the 7 Buddha's teachings, the mind will naturally calm, the heart will naturally find peace, and life will naturally be joyful. The path of spiritual cultivation is not only for those in temples, but for all of us, in every small action each day. So when you feel uneasy, remember the Buddha's teachings. Purity is within the mind. Anger needs to be controlled. Thoughts should be directed towards goodness. Conquering oneself is the greatest victory. Replace envy with admiration. Be kind to all, and live in harmony with circumstances. These are the 7 doors that open to a peaceful life. My dear friend, happiness does not lie in what we possess, but in how we nurture our souls. When the mind is pure, all suffering is resolved. When the mind is pure, this life will become a brilliant lotus flower, blooming in each person's heart. Perhaps each of us has at least once asked ourselves why some people are born into abundant wealth, while others toil their entire lives and still have little to spare. Some families are always harmonious, with filial children and joyful parents. In contrast, some homes are frequently filled with discord, disobedient children, and fractured family bonds. Some people suffer from chronic illness and endless pain, while others are healthy, peaceful, and receive love and help wherever they go. Faced with these realities, many people often believe it's due to predetermined fate or divine will. However, according to the Buddha's teachings, everything in life arises from causes and conditions, and is the result of wholesome or unwholesome karma that we have sown from the past to the present. To have happiness and peace, there is no other way than to know how to create merit. Merit is not something distant, nor is it something we can buy or sell with money. Merit is like a field. The seeds are our actions, words, and thoughts in daily life. If we sow wholesome seeds, seeds of love, seeds of compassion, then one day that field will bear abundant fruit, bringing sweetness to our lives and to our loved ones. But if we sow selfishness, greed, and anger into it, it's like, personally, making the field of life barren, unable to expect a bountiful harvest. In the scriptures, the Buddha clearly taught that there are many ways for a layperson to create merit, cultivate a wholesome mind, and bring benefit to themselves and to the world. Today, let's talk about 10 ways to create merit that anyone can practice, regardless of wealth, status, or circumstances. These are generosity, dana, making offerings, puja, upholding precepts, sila, humility, patience, dedication of merit, caring for the sick, listening to the Dharma, meditation, dhyana, and filial piety. While these may sound grand, they actually begin with small things in daily life. First, let's consider generosity, dana. Dana is not just about giving money or material possessions, but also about sharing kindness, giving love, and offering help within one's capacity. A word of comfort, a timely handhold, is also a form of dana. When a person knows how to open their heart without stinginess or selfishness, their mind immediately feels light and joyful. And then, these good deeds naturally return, like a cool stream of water, nourishing one's life. Closely linked with dana is making offerings, puja. Offerings, puja, are not limited to bringing money or gifts to a temple, but more importantly, are made with a sincere heart. When we bring a flower, an incense stick, or a bowl of water, as long as our mind is pure and reverent, that is an offering. Making offerings to the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, is a way to cultivate wholesome connections, thereby accumulating merit and making the spiritual path increasingly clear. Another equally important practice is upholding precepts, sila. Upholding precepts means observing moral conduct, knowing how to refrain from unwholesome actions, and knowing how to perform wholesome actions. Observing precepts is not overly difficult, such as not taking life, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct, not lying, and not consuming intoxicants. Each precept is a shield, protecting us from suffering and sowing further blessings for life. A person who observes precepts is one who has self-respect, loves themselves, and protects others. Humility is also a way to create merit. A humble person is not arrogant, does not consider themselves superior, and knows how to humble themselves, to learn, and to love. In life, there are people who are very wealthy and skilled, but due to their pride, no one wants to be near them. Conversely, there are people who live simply, are modest, always yielding and listening, and everyone holds them in high regard. The merit from such humility is not easily measured, but it creates lasting warmth in people's hearts. Patience is also a seed of merit. In this life, it's difficult to avoid moments of disagreement or adversity. If we only react with anger, it only piles on more suffering. But if we know how to be patient, look to the long term, and choose reconciliation instead of conflict, we not only maintain our own peace, but also resolve many karmic entanglements. The Buddha taught that among all dharma, patience is the highest, for through patience, countless unwholesome actions are avoided. Another point to mention is the dedication of merit. After every wholesome deed, no matter how small, we can dedicate the merit. This means not keeping it for ourselves, but dedicating that merit to our parents, loved ones, and all sentient beings. Dedicating merit does not diminish our own merit. On the contrary, it increases it because our hearts become more expansive. Furthermore, caring for the sick is also a great act of merit creation. When we see someone ill, if we are willing to help and care for them, it's as if we are making an offering to the Buddha himself. For the Buddha taught that one who cares for the sick with compassion generates immeasurable merit. In daily life, simply taking the time to care for an ailing loved one or visiting a lonely elderly friend already manifests that merit. Listening to the Dharma is also a way to create merit. Each time we open our hearts to listen to the Buddha's teachings, to understand the principles of karma and impermanence, we are sowing seeds of wisdom. That wisdom will guide us out of the suffering caused by ignorance. One who regularly listens to the Dharma is like someone walking in darkness who finds a lamp, walking steadily and unafraid of getting lost. Meditation, dhyana, is no less important. When meditating, we return to ourselves, calm distracting thoughts, and settle the mind into tranquility. From that tranquility, wisdom and merit arise, and we live a lighter, more steadfast life. Meditation is not esoteric. Simply dedicating a few moments each day to slow breathing and letting go of worries is already sowing seeds of meditation in our lives. Finally, filial piety, Hu Tuan, is one of the great roots of merit. A child who knows how to respect, love, and care for their parents is sowing important, wholesome seeds. The Buddha once taught that filial piety is the greatest field of merit among all fields of merit, because parents are the ones who gave birth, nurtured, and endured countless hardships for us. If we live ungratefully and without loyalty, there is no way we can hope for complete peace and joy. To illustrate these 10 ways of creating merit, let's recall the story of Mr. Min's family. Mr. Min was born into an ordinary, not wealthy family, but from a young age, his parents taught him to live kindly. As an adult, he and his wife and children regularly practiced generosity, dana, sometimes helping struggling neighbors, sometimes bringing a small amount of rice to the temple as an offering, puja. Whenever someone was sick, his family didn't hesitate to visit.